Hello and welcome to Pods Like Us. I'm Martin Quibell, known to my friends as Marv, and this time I'm speaking with Mark Francis from Caloroga Shark Media. Hello, Mark. Thanks for speaking today.
Hello, and thank you very much for having me on board. I want to start this interview with asking you, how did you find out about us?
The honest answer is that somebody mentioned, is it Five Good News Stories to me?
Hmm.
And so I started listening to that, and that's a fun show. And then during that show, adverts. So this proves that it works. Advertising works. And there are adverts in there for different Caloroga Shark Media shows. And I was just fascinated with all these shows that showed up. And then the deeper you go into it, the more I get interested because there's like really good drama shows. Then you've also got, there's the one, is it Sleep from Space? I think that's from yourselves.
A
Then
little
you've got,
transcendental meditation, sleep at night.
yep.
Hmm.
And there's all that. And then you've got Monsters, Sharks and Dinosaurs that's similar as well and uses the same voice as well. And then you've also got, I love the Clint Eastwood show. That's brilliant. Somebody needs to
Yep.
actually do a show that's all about Clint Eastwood. And then suddenly when I noticed, I thought, yep, got to, because that's my most watched actor, actually. I think I've seen most of his films. He's probably the most that I've seen of film wise. And yeah, I should have just answered and said, yeah, I heard from there. But it just snowballs from there to listening to even more shows and getting more interest in them because they're all quality.
Well, thank you. Yeah, the Eastwood one, I didn't realize before diving into this show what a complex character he is behind the scenes as well as in front, and how instrumental he's been in movie development and using his own money and his own resources and his own talent and knowledge to grow over the years. It's an incredibly interesting story, his background.
Yeah, I always find it interesting. There's a great story that I've heard from, there was an interview with Tom Hanks, and he was saying that when he worked on a film Clint had directed, and he said that on the set, it's a strange thing, he said, because you go there and he's a quiet man when it comes to directing, Clint is. And I do like this story very
Yeah.
much. And he was saying that instead of saying action and cut, he'll say something like, "Let's see what happens," and that just allows that was his way of saying action, and then cut. He said, "That's enough of that," and then he'll go to another. He won't say cut, and he'll just say it quietly. And then Tom Hanks said that the reason for this is you've got to remember. He said that he started as the main actor in Rawhide, which is a cowboy, a Western television series, and they had to all be quiet because of the horses on the set. So he learnt that sort of style of direction from watching them because they were trying to maintain the peace and not trying to scare the horses. And I always thought that was a great story.
Yeah, fascinating man. Check out Eastwood Reloaded wherever you get your podcasts.
Absolutely.
Thank you for that plug.
Yep, no problem. I'll keep plugging the shows on my blog, Marv's Midlife Meanderings. All my podcast listening goes up on there for people to check out and my notes. So, what was your introduction to podcast?
So I'm originally from Australia. I've lived in New York now for 40 years. So I'm a New Yorker these days. My father was in radio in Australia for 65 years. He was a talk show host there.
Yeah.
Never had the desire to get into radio because of that, because he was so popular. But when I fell in love with New York, decided to stay here, and I ended up got me a spot as an intern at a rock radio station in New York. And I started working for this company, and it was fantastic. I loved rock radio in the 80s
Yep.
and 90s in America. Was the primo gold standard of rock radio, a great place to be. And so I got that experience. Then the dot-com boom came and we got into internet radio. Then that collapsed after a couple of years. And I started a company called Sirius XM here in the States,
Yeah.
is the biggest satellite radio company. It's the way radio has evolved here compared to the UK, where it's still, satellite radio really isn't big there. But, I was there for about 20 years. And satellite radio started, around 2002, and the radio business, which the people in the radio business where I came from, were all saying, "There's no way. Who's going to pay for radio? And how is this evolution going to happen? It's nobody's going to pay for radio." But they ended up, doing it. Because it was commercial free. The format survived. The company thrived. It went through a merger with another company called XM. There were two companies at the time. There was Sirius and XM,
Yeah.
and it was only the merger of those two companies that made them survivable. And then, so that was a great run. Did that. I've always been behind the scenes in the production positions, and then got into podcasting.
Yeah.
I was only just it's just a typical evolution of what we were doing. And I had a friend who was at Sirius XM. His name is John McDermott. He's my business partner, and I'll mention him a few times as we go along because he's very instrumental in the way the company's developed. But so we were friends at Sirius. We both ventured off into different podcasting companies. And then a couple of years ago, sorry, let me just go back, about 3 or 4 years ago, we had an idea for a podcast, just as a hobby. And it was called Palace Intrigue.
Yes.
And at that time, the Queen was getting old, Prince Philip was getting old, Meghan and Harry just got married, and there was enough news going on all the time that there was enough to do a daily podcast about this.
Yeah.
So it was only 7 or 8 minutes long, and we started doing this daily podcast. And then Megxit happened, and then the Queen died, and all this other big news happened around the royal family. So it turned into our biggest. It still is our biggest hit.
Yeah.
And it's because there is a never-ending supply of entertainment coming out of that family, and especially on the California side of it all now. And so we did this show on the side, and we found that we were both working for big corporations, big podcasting companies, who would spend $250,000 to put together a 10-part, 12-part series. And there was just the return on that investment was just not happening.
Yeah.
And we saw that. We were all employees at the time, but we saw that happening, and we just thought, how sustainable is this going to be? And obviously, a lot of those companies collapsed. But we had this little podcast on the side, and it was profitable. And we liked this business model of 10 minutes. It's long enough to throw a mid-roll in, I think is the best way to put it. But still short, sweet, daily bite of entertainment. And we kind of developed that business model, keeping them all. Our thing was to do short form podcasts.
Yeah.
And so we stuck with that model, and we built different shows. John is in the comedy world, so he does a daily comedy show for us still. Then we did 5 good news stories and 5 daily trivia questions, kind of these little easy to manage, put together formats, bite-sized entertainment, enough space for one mid-roll and a pre-roll. We started experimenting. Now, all of these were live hosts. They were either John or I hosting these shows. You get to a point where 2 guys can only do so much and host so many shows. And, we were both sort of tech junkies. And about a year and a half ago, we started following the transition of all the AI companies out there and how they were developing and what they were doing and how they were sounding. And, a year and a half ago, they didn't really sound that great yet, but they were getting better, and they were getting better exponentially, and you could hear it subtly. And so we started incorporating some of these voices into shows, just to more of an experiment at the time, because they really didn't sound great, but the voices got better. And we found voices by experimenting with different companies and experimenting with different prompts and methods, and found voices that worked, that would last, that were listenable for 7 or 8 minutes. And you had to find voices that had not only didn't sound monotone, but were able to give cadence and color and emotion and all these new things that AI voices weren't doing at the time. So we found these voices, and we were able to sort of branch out a bit more. And I wanted to do a Taylor Swift show at one point, and hosted the first episode, and went, I'm just not right for this. I'm a 56, 5-year-old guy hosting a teen women's concert show. Just didn't work very well. So I found a female voice on one of the programs and tried that, and it worked well. It was a nice, casual, comfy AI voice. It didn't sound AI. And then we learned how to take some of these voices and then add elements and learn the prompts, learn the color, learn to put pacing in, how to really make them shine, make them real enough. So that was our first foray into the AI world and voices.
Yeah.
And then we started to learn about the other elements that went with it. The Chat GPTs came out, and the Claudes and the Perplexities and all these other ones that we use these days, and how to involve them, how to involve video, Hey Gens, and all those synesthesia kind of programs to use those as well. And then there were the music programs and the Soras and Notebook LMs and all these other elements came around, and we started experimenting with them all. To the point now that we've done about 40 different shows in a year and a half.
Yeah.
Some of them are awful and didn't really work out. We've dropped those, but some of them are really good. Some of them have been hits, and we've kind of developed a two-tier system where we do these 5 daily trivias, these 5 good news stories, the Palace Intrigues. They're our money makers. They're the big shows.
Yeah.
The very simple ones. And then we like to do some more fiction, soundscape, design, color productions that sort of give us a branding, give us an image, give us some sort of more prestige, and sort of expand in what we can do AI. And that's kind of where we're at now.
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to read a lot of them off now. So I personally listened to 5 good news stories. What else do I listen to? Acting president. That is a great idea. That's really clever. The whole idea of somebody who used to be a governor is suddenly doing a television series where he's trying to become president, and then people have sort of interested and approaching him to potentially take over the real president. I mean, that's a fascinating idea in itself. Hitmaker Chronicles, Eastwood Reloaded. I listened to Monsters, Sharks, and Dinosaurs, and list is endless. Operation Rising Lion, like I said, and all these other sleep. I could go on for ages. All these shows, like I said, you could do a deep dive, and there's so many of them. So we've got the story of list.
Yeah, some of the ones you just mentioned then, the Rising Lion. We're really good now at taking the rip from the headlines stories, which Operation Rising Lion was the attack on Iran. We're able to turn around these ideas in 24, 48 hours, come up with at least one episode, put out the press release, make it sound like, hey, we're on top of things, and then spend the next few weeks writing the rest of the episodes. But we did that. We did Signal Lost, which was based on the Signal app leak from the government. We came up with White Smoke, which is the papal evolution just before the Pope was getting ill. We jumped on that one for a bit of SEO, but now it just follows his life daily because he's an American Pope. There's a lot more news about him here, so there's enough material to keep that show going. So a lot of these ripped from the headline stories are a lot of fun, very, very topical.
Absolutely. So, wow, from scratch to success. I mean, it's a very quick journey as well. The Caloroga Shark, how it's grown in such a short space of time from just being that basic one show to the big show. So, what is the actual? How does it work then with you and John? And do you have a staff there now that you rely on to help you with these things?
We're it. We're the staff. There's just the two of us. We hope to get to a point where we can have staff help, and we're pretty sure we can do that at some point in the future. But right now we're just managing what we can do with what we have and trying to build the company from there. I mean, the name came from the street I grew up in, Adelaide, Australia, was called Caloroga Street. That's where that name came from,
Yeah.
and his company was called the Shark Deck.
My
So I
other
came up
half
with
in
Caloroga
my
Shark.
other half in the other room asked that. She said, "Oh, is he from that area?" Because we looked at Caloroga and it was there, and there's something. Is there there's a street near to it that it comes off that is a very British name street, and I can't remember the name of it now. Something like Buckinghamshire Street or something like that. I can't remember the name now.
Oh, yeah. A lot of those streets were Aboriginal names of the development of Adelaide at the time, I think.
But yes, when we were talking Caloroga Shark, my other half said, "Oh, is he from Australia then?" And I said, "Well, no, I think he's from New York because he's only 5 hours behind." But then that explains it.
Exactly.
What are you looking for in shows then? Because, like I said, there's a variety there, and is that the idea where you're trying to be not like some of these podcasting companies where they're specifically in one genre, you're trying to look at all genres. It's almost like you're interested in all types of you're interested in everything. So therefore, that's the shows that you're looking for is a bit of everything.
Yeah, that stems from John and I didn't grow up in the podcast world. We grew up in live radio world. Sirius XM was live radio, the terrestrial radio was live radio. So every day at work, you're always constantly developing what's happening now outside. How do we incorporate it inside and get it on the air? So we've both got that mentality of something's happening, let's make something about it and get it on the air. We tend to call ourselves the McDonald's of podcasting because it's just short, sweet, and it tastes good, and it's cheap, but it's fun and it's effective, and it's okay. We're not doing a five-star restaurant kind of podcast, but we're trying to do a lot more. We're trying to build a business model out of it, and the more time you spend on it, the less time you've got to do more of. And this is right now to make money in this business. There's obviously two types of podcasters. There's the hobbyists, and there's the people doing it as a business. And the hobbyists have a lot more time and effort and energy they want to put into their production. But we're trying to build a business, and it's a tough business. As you know, ads are hard to get and somewhat unstable at different times of the year. The bottom line is we're in this to make money.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So, well, the next one, the sourcing creativity, that is yourselves at the moment. But saying that, it's not just yourselves. Like the five good news stories, that's somebody else presenting that, isn't it?
That is an AI voice. Yes.
Is it?
All of them, except if you don't hear my accent or a guy from Queens, New York, they're all AI. And we've really managed to work these voices well. We use a company, 11 Labs, for the most part now. We've used many. I've played with every company out there. There's a lot of disparity in the quality of voices from company to company. There's a lot of disparity from the same voice from one company to another, depending on the algorithms they're using to feed those voices. There's a fun thing I noticed just recently on TikTok and on TV ads. I was hearing this one particular voice. It was sort of a Morgan Freeman-esque, but not anywhere near as charming and wonderful as his. But I hear it all the time. And then suddenly I'm on 11 Labs and I accidentally clicked the first voice out of the hundreds, if not thousands of voices that they have. And it's this guy called Adam. And it's that voice. And that's what people do. They just pick the first one there. They use that as their voice for their product and don't spend the time to research, listen, and build on those characters. And that would be one of my pieces of advice for people who are looking for, finding the right voice in the AI world is to get out there and go through the voices and spend the time. You will find that if you've got it depends on whether you're doing like a 30-second commercial or a 60-second promo or a 10-minute story.
Yep.
You can have one voice that will work great for the 30 seconds, but once you start to get 60 or 2 minutes in, you're going to hear that same flattened, sort of like a rhythmic metronome kind of. It's just constantly delivering that same ticking cadence. And you'll get bored with it, and you'll know it's AI. So you've got to find the right voices that are able to chat and expand and emote and have some sort of different rhythm to it, and that takes some work. And that was one of the little the special sources of that makes our company good is the research and time we've put into finding these voices, because there's a lot of crap out there as well.
So producing the shows, then, I mean, there's a lot that goes into it. Not only in this case, the use of the AI with that, but you've also got the sounds that you put into these, especially the drama shows. You put sounds in there and different things like that. There's that to add into there. So there's that production to it. And then you've got the logos and the artwork as well. So there's a lot that goes into it, and that is all yourselves. What jobs do you do between you, or does it change accordingly? You pick whichever job works for each of you.
Yeah, we both have pretty much the same talents. John tends to focus a bit more on the marketing and that side of it all, whereas I'll focus a bit more on the production side. He'll do a bit more of the writing side. I've been in production for the last 20 years at Sirius XM, so I'm not the greatest producer in the world, but I know how to put a show together and give it some emotion and color and some music behind it, and certainly make a story more involved and entertaining and make it move along a little faster. So I'm good at sort of adding that sound design to it.
Yeah. And how's the artwork? How does that come about?
That's all coming through AI.
Yep.
Yeah.
So you'll put in there what you're looking for, and then the AI will bring out based on your algorithm what you bring out what it does.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the tricks with that learning prompts is difficult in AI, and you almost have to ask AI for it to write a prompt for it to do something. Helps get a better result. And usually, once we've come up with an idea for the show or for the series, I'll put that into AI and ask it to come up with a prompt for artwork for that show based on what the series already is. And it can talk to AI better than I can.
Yeah. Yeah. Something I meant to say earlier and I forgot, which was you were talking about the length of the shows, and I'll just say that if people ever ask me, I'll say that the shows that you make, it's almost like snacks that you have between these bigger long shows. That's a good way to sort of describe it. If you like a nice long podcast, it's good to have that sort of these snacks in between, and these are really tasty snacks, if that's a good analogy.
Exactly. And I think that originally stemmed from the average commute in America being 18 minutes, whether that's a subway or a car ride. We use that as that's the time you've got to listen to one episode. Let's do it all in that amount of time. And there are plenty of shows out there that are an hour or 2 hours or 3 hours long. And if you want that sort of a show, there's plenty of other options.
Yeah, it sort of reminds me of television back in the day that we used to have, especially children's television, where you'd have like these couple of hours that were, or 2.5 to 3 hours that were television for children when they're coming from school. So you'd have these shorter 5 or 10 minute shows, then you'd have a longer half an hour show that's like we have in this country, Blue Peter and things like that, and you have the same in Australia. I know that because I've seen some of them over. But yeah, that was sort of the analogy I was going with, is because you've got all these little bite-sized shows that kept kids that were like, oh, that's great. And then you had these longer shows, even if they're only half an hour, that were more expanded in the subjects, and that's how I like my listening personally, to be that varied. I like the longer form, but I also like the shorter form there to keep the interest going and to give it something different.
Yeah, and it just becomes a more effective, efficient way of building a show. And if it doesn't work, you haven't invested too much time into it. I certainly, like a lot of people these days, have a much shorter attention span than I used to have. And it's in the world of TikTok and 20-second sound bites everywhere and 5-second sound bites. We try to do things shorter and more entertaining. And
Yeah,
a lot of these series too we'll break them down. If I have a 3 hour story, I'll just break it down into 15 episodes or 15 parts,
yeah,
just so that they're still bite sized, but the story is still there if you want to keep going.
yeah. That's like the old television shows we used to watch, where you'd have a cliffhanger. So you
Yeah.
have a cliffhanger there, and then you wait for the next episode to come the next week, and brilliant. So yeah, the use of AI. This one is sort of different that I've got in my notes, which is podcasting 2.0. It's an interesting one because a lot of independent podcasters actually don't know anything about it. And I do, because I've looked well into it. What do you think of podcasting 2.0 and the future of the RSS feed, essentially?
Explain a bit more on what you mean by that.
It's just changes that they've made to the details that you can put in when you post your podcast up. There's more, you can put more notes in, you can chapter things now, and you can put all these different elements in that you couldn't do beforehand with RSS feeds. And it's just, what do you think about those, and where do you think that we could go next with the things that you put in there, such as transcriptions and things, into that sort of the tech side?
Yeah, I'm not a big expert on that side of it all. I wish I had John here to help me out with that answer. I think the biggest resistance we're having at the moment, in the future of podcasting, is is the use of AI voices. And that seems to have the most resistance to old school podcasters.
Yeah.
And, John was having a discussion with James Cridland. I don't know if you know him from Pod News and
Yeah.
about this whole situation. And James was originally against promoting our shows with AI voices. And then, he sort of gave the analogy of listening to your favorite Queen album, an album, and it's got a drum track on it. Does that make it any more fake or unreal or unenjoyable or unlistenable just because parts of the show were put together synthetically? I think when it comes down to AI voices, if we're two guys, we can't do every voice there. We don't have the time to, and we need to utilize something else. And I think the bottom line is if the voice sounds entertaining and it sounds real enough, and you're not out there trying to fake somebody into pretending this is a real person, if it's enjoyable and entertaining, why not? It's just another element and tool to use.
Yeah, I mean, the creativity of it is still coming from two people, from yourself and John. The only difference is that you're using an AI voice, technically, as the presenter of these shows. All the rest of it, the creativity, is coming from your own mind. You're creating the scripts to these things, and that's all coming from you. So I don't personally have a problem with that at all. I mean, I had the same conversation with you know him, Ben Fields, he's an expert in AI, and he's also somebody that the governments go to, and he was part of the team that when they had the strikes the other year in America, he was part of the team that sort of tried to work in that to make the rules for use of AI in media. So he does something called virtually Parkinson with Jamie
Yes,
Anderson,
yes.
Jerry Anderson's son. So he makes that with them. And so he said that he was saying there that so long as you've got a transparency there and you're not trying to hoodwink people, and another one that he does is with that, he says he will leave the flaws in there because technically they're using it as a way to show people that this is AI, but it's not the Terminator world of AI. It is what it is. There's none of that there. You can see the flaws with it. It's not perfect, but that's how it is. And he said, so long as you've got the transparency there, what's the problem with it?
Yeah, I mean, we put a little disclaimer at the end of every episode that says AI may have been used in the production of this episode. We certainly don't try to mislead anybody on what they are. We certainly will never do an ad written or voiced by a host that will endorse a product. I think that's the limit or a line you shouldn't cross. Otherwise, I mean, there's a lot of ads out there read by AI and read by AI versions of current big hosts you'll hear.
Yeah, I remember I do another show, Toppermost of the Poppermost, where we go through the charts, and that is an interesting show because we edit that in a two thing. So I'll do an initial edit, and then Ed Chen, who was one of the other co-hosts, he does an edit as well. And we had this point where we picked up on it, where we had this problem. We couldn't get the third host to come and join with us to do the chat to try and fix this little bit that needed putting into an episode that wasn't quite right. And Ed actually used AI with our voices to create this little bit to fill in this gap where there was an error in there. And it was nobody noticed at all, although we probably should have said that that was AI based, maybe in the disclaimer.
Yeah, we've left some AI glitches in just to make it sound a bit more human at times. And if it stutters a word here or there, a lot of these voice programs have breathing in them now. You can hear breaths and you can hear mouth clicks and certain little human ticks, I guess, making its way into AI just to make it sound a little more real.
So does the AI know that this is almost I almost feel stupid because my knowledge of it is not as good as it probably should be. So does the AI actually realize is it programmed? No, that's a stupid question. There's no way that the AI can know that it's actually doing a podcast.
I wish I understood how AI works and how
Yeah.
those voices work, how the algorithm puts together something. I know that if I can regenerate a paragraph, it will come out differently than the time before. Everything it reads is its first time.
Yeah.
Some of these new programs now you can actually add emotions in the text. Laughter, say it slowly, say it excitedly, say it in whatever. Those kinds of prompts are good for if you're spending a lot of time on a 30-second commercial. But
Yeah.
if you're doing the amount of programs that we knock out, we can't do that much. We can't spend that much time fine tuning the voice. It is what it is. But that all goes back to that researching of the right voice. Like the Eastwood voice was perfect. It was just got that great gravelly old character that certainly flows nicely and it tells a story and it moves. It's spend the time to find the right one.
Yeah. And it is the perfect voice for acting president as well. Is that's the same voice, isn't it?
It might be. Yeah, there's a few crossover voices there.
Yeah. But
I tend to I find one that I really like and I don't want to let it go, so I'll put it on the next series.
yeah, absolutely. So, what advice would you give to people looking into the world of podcasting?
Well, first, are you looking into the world of podcasting as a hobby or a business? And I think you have to make that decision from the onset because, if you're doing it as a hobby, it's you're going to take one different course than you would if you want to make it a business. If you're going to make it a business on your own, I think AI is your only course of action these days. I doubt there's a producer in any company for any podcast company right now who's not using AI. They won't admit it. But remember that it is a tool, not a replacement in any manner, except maybe it can replace a voice. But when using it to construct and to do the artwork and to do the scripting, it's fantastic in the sense that, it, when building a series, it remembers how the series has been built. You can re-prompt all the way through it to expand on characters or go back. You can ask it to look at the storyline again for continuity. And hey, Claude, am I doing this right? Does it sound right to you? Should there be a different character? Should there be a better character? Should this character not do this? Although all these AI companies tend to pander to you and tell you you're the greatest producer in the world, you do have to fight them sometimes to say what's wrong with this and really dive into not pampering you. And then you've got to double check your AI can be wrong, and it
Yeah.
is wrong a lot of the time, especially with facts and certain things. We have a show called Feuds. Power, Pride, Payback. And I just started it because of the Elon Musk Trump feud that was going on a couple of weeks ago
Yeah.
and did a few episodes based on that. And then there's the Blake Lively, Justin Baldoni feud. And then there's all these other classic ones I thought I could incorporate as well as current ones. And I was doing a Star Trek versus Star Wars. And I'm a Trekkie.
Yeah.
And it came out with a script and some lines, and the paragraph said something like Star Wars fans are 50% more likely to drink light beer and 30% more likely to go to a baseball game. Whereas Star Trek fans are 50% more likely to go to a gay bar and shop at Lego. And I took offense to that because I haven't shopped at Lego since I was 5 years old. But the
Wow.
joke aside, I don't know where it pulled the gay joke out. But check your sources.
Yeah. Yeah. But it's the same. So first of all, I'll pick up on what you were saying about producers use AI. They use them in the radio, they use them in the television, they use them in all forms of media nowadays. AI is used, and sometimes with the editing, it's used. And I'll just emphasize something that a previous guest said to me. I can't remember which guest it was now. God, I've done 250 episodes, so I've had a lot of guests. But they were saying that if you use AI for editing for any part of it, always give it that human element where you double check every part of it to make sure that it's right. Because sometimes with editing, even it can clip things and it won't sound quite right. So you have to make sure that it is before it goes out there to the public. Make sure that it's got that it is absolutely perfect to your specifications.
Yeah, we dabbled a little bit earlier on too with foreign language versions of these shows, which is getting better and better, but it's still not 95% there. And if you're not a fluent Spanish speaker, you're not going to hear when it makes these tiny errors. And then you've got we tried some Spanish versions of fiction shows, and one of them was a ghost story about Thanksgiving.
Yeah.
And we did it all in Spanish, and then afterwards kind of found out the hard way that there is no Thanksgiving in any Spanish country. So the whole point of a Thanksgiving themed ghost story just didn't make any sense, even though it was written and translated correctly. The whole purpose of Thanksgiving just didn't work. And then you've got your localized Spanish regions. You've got, something in Portugal is going to sound completely different from Mexico City. It's all that's a whole other world we can't get into.
Yeah, yeah.
Unless you're fluent in that language, I don't see much of. It's. I think it's good for if Joe Rogan wants to be on in Mexico City, great.
It's like Australia, you go to Australia, for instance, people in Australia will know the difference between somebody that's from Sydney and somebody that's from Melbourne because they'll have these different ways of talking and their language will be slightly different. It's like England. I sound nothing like somebody from London, but then I also don't sound like anybody that's from Newcastle.
Yeah.
That, there's those different accents or different. So what podcast do you like to listen to if you get the time to listen to them?
Now, that's an important thing because if I get the time is very rare. I do spend pretty much all my day on my own shows. I wish I had a really good, cool answer for something that nobody's listened to that I could recommend. But I just like a good classic escape, like a Conan O'Brien kind of show. It's some of the big hits. They're easy to digest and they're fun. And I like people who have the ability to expand on their talents in their different environment. And the podcasting world offers Conan a whole different realm of entertainment that he was unable to do in traditional media. Yeah. So I'll leave it at Conan, but that's about. I have a very limited knowledge of the really cool shows out there because I don't get a lot of time to check them out.
No, because you're too busy making all of these shows yourself that take all your time up.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay, so how can people get hold of you then, Mark, and where can they find Caloroga Shark Media?
Yeah, so the website is caloroga.com. That's CALOROGA.com. And you can reach out to me, Mark at Caloroga or John at Caloroga. And that's the whole team.
All right. Thank you very much, John. Thanks for chatting with me today. This was fun.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. You can find pods like us on any streaming platform that you use. And if you just go to themarvzone.org, you will find all the links for everything there. All the socials are on there and everything that you need. Anyway, thank you everyone for listening, and I hope you listen again to another episode of Pods Like Us.